me, I was writing spring questions that Big 12 teams need to answer. I did an SEC article last week, did the Big 12 this week. And for me, when I looked at Kansas State, the big question that kept coming to mind is what on earth do they do without Deuce Vaughn, right? That guy was the heartbeat of the Wildcats for the last 2 years, and now off to the NFL. We're obviously recording this pre-draft, so not sure where Deuce is going to end up going, but I'm sure he's going to have a fun NFL career. That doesn't mean that Chris Kleiman and the boys get to, coast on Deuce's success anymore, right? They've got to go find their next running back. And in that article, which you can find on the Transfer Portal CFB website, I list 3 candidates that Kansas State will likely turn to fill that void. The guy that jumps out in my first breakout candidate, is sophomore running back DJ Giddens. Giddens was the backup last year, and because Vaughn was the superstar, because Vaughn was a human highlight reel waiting to happen, and because of his small stature, everybody loved his story. Giddens really didn't get a lot of run last year, but guys, a 6'1", 210-pound running back very quietly got almost 6 yards a tote, right? 518 yards, 5.8 yards a carry on the ground. He had 6 touchdowns, so Kansas State actually turned to him quite a few times in short yardage situations, especially around the goal line. And for me, in a system that really prioritized and rewarded the ability to run the football, now with maybe a less than aerial quarterback in Adrian Martinez, now they've got Will Howard, so the offense might shift even more towards the passing attack, but still, Kleiman's an old school guy, right? He prioritizes being able to pick up the chains and get those first downs. Giddens, to me, is kind of built in a lab for, I think, what Kansas State wants to do. He's very powerful in his lower half. He runs angry. He's athletic. He can get between the tackles. I know that he's not immediately going to fill the shoes of Deuce Vaughn, nor should he. But for me, he's a different style player, and yet I think he can help elevate Kansas State to where they stay at the top of the Big 12 this season.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. If you want to just know how successful he can be, he only had 10 carries a couple times, so obviously not the numbers that you would expect from most, running backs that you want to prove if they had success. But if you look at that game against Alabama at the end of the year, he had 9 carries for 67 yards. That's 7.4 yards per carry. That's really solid, right? 7.4 yards a carry against a very good Alabama team. I know that it's a bowl game, and maybe some of those were because they jumped ahead and they didn't care as much. Whatever, okay? You can say whatever you want to say. Fact of the matter is, he had success against Alabama. And I think that that's the kind of thing you have to look for, especially since that's the last thing we saw out of him. That's the thing you have to look for going into this next season in the Big 12, where you're bringing in a bunch of brand new teams, so who knows how that's going to look. You've got a Texas and Oklahoma team. They're both leaving, so we don't know, where their motivation is going to be, if they want to, go out on top, or if they just don't really care. They're looking forward to the SEC. We don't know where the motivation is going to be for anybody. What we do know is Kansas State had a great season last year. We do know that Will Howard seems to be a really good quarterback. He already kind of made his name known. And I think with him being able to, kind of take the pressure off the run game, which is really why they ended up losing that game to Tulane earlier in the season, was just because they couldn't run the ball. They got smothered. If you can take the pressure off of the run game, I think that you're in a really good position as Kansas State to have success, both in the run game and just offensively overall, to have a really balanced offense. And especially with a guy like Giddens, I mean, he's got all the tools, right? He's got all the tools that you'd be looking for. He's a lot more sizable. Not that that was a problem for Deuce Vaughn, but he's got the size. He's got all the tools. Mitch, this is a great pick for you.
What I'll be interested to see with Giddens is, does he slide completely into the Deuce Vaughn role, or do they try to break up Deuce Vaughn's roles into multiple pieces? Because I think Giddens is certainly going to be the primary runner, it seems like. But what made Deuce Vaughn so dangerous is he had 116 receptions throughout his career. Like, he was their wide receiver 1, in addition to ripping off, 8 yards a carry on the ground at times throughout his career. So I don't know that they're going to be able to find the entire package in one player. I think that's just so rare to give you what Deuce Vaughn gave you over the last 3 seasons. But, for Giddens, I think he definitely has the juice on the ground. We've seen that in the past. We haven't really seen it through the air, so I'll be interested to see if he shows more of that component to his game this year. But on the ground, he's absolutely going to be a deadly weapon for the Wildcats.
Well, and it's a good point that you bring that up, because as I look at Kansas State's running back stable, they don't really have that proven pass catcher out of the backfield. So the other two guys I mentioned in this article are senior transfer Trayshawn Ward from Florida State, and then incoming 4-star running back Joe Jackson. Jackson's probably the guy that can catch more passes out of the backfield, but he's a true freshman who's going to be, at the very best, RB3. You could even argue that Trayshawn Ward, if he proves himself in camp, will get to be RB1 because he's coming over as a senior from Florida State. He's compiled over 1,200 yards in his career, 12 touchdowns. He's never gotten to be the guy for the Noles. But Trayshawn is not the pass-catching running back. I mean, over 4 years in Tallahassee, he just hasn't proven himself to be that, even though he's only 5'10", 189. So I don't know if they have that true element yet. I don't know if Kansas State knows if they have that true element yet. But I do think when you look at, even if they are just splitting reps between Giddens and Ward, I still really like what we saw from Giddens. And I think, you look at their schedule, guys, it's not an easy schedule out of the gate. They play Missouri, UCF, Oklahoma State, and Texas Tech games 3 through 6 on their calendar. So it's not, and they've got Troy and in week 2 at family week. So, I memean, it's not an easy schedule. Still, though, if Will Howard's throwing the ball and they find a consistent runner at RB1, gosh, guys, I mean, 6-0 is not out of the realm of possibility heading into a game against TCU. They've got the tricky part will be at Oklahoma State, which I'm actually going to talk about, who I think their quarterback one will be the next time around. And then they're at Texas Tech. So for me, a couple of tricky road games that are kind of sandwiched there at the beginning of your conference slate. I don't know what I'm going to project their record to be right now, but I do know that having a guy like Giddens will make it a lot easier to go and win those games, control the clock, especially when you're on the road trying to take the air out of a place like Lubbock, like Stillwater. I think Giddens can be a big guy.
Gracious him! How about that?